Over the weekend, indirect talks between the US and Iran took place in Oman, with both sides describing the discussions as constructive. However, yesterday afternoon, Iran reiterated that it will not abandon uranium enrichment, insisting that any deal must recognize its right to continue the program, even if there may be some flexibility around enrichment levels. For oil markets, this distinction matters. It influences the prospects of sanctions relief, the potential return of Iranian supply, and the size of the geopolitical risk premium. To help us unpack what's really at stake for markets, I'm joined by Marco Saggese, VP of Clearing and Execution Sales at StoneX. Welcome back, Marco.
Thank you very much.
So, Marco, let's start with where things stand right now. So, after the talks over the weekend and Iranians' follow-up comments, which I just mentioned, how would you describe the current state of Iran-US negotiations from a market perspective?
So the negotiations are very fragile, as they would be in such a sensitive area. It's been going on for many years. The differences that have existed between Iran and US are very, very obvious. The Iranians taken a very positive stance, I feel, over this. They are ready to negotiate, but they're also not ready to just lie down. It's quite clear that they want to carry on with their enrichment program, and they're working their way through this negotiation by offering sort of an olive branch almost to the US. Say, look, you've got to learn to trust us. You've got to learn that we are not looking to create nuclear weapons, and that we are using uranium for the right purposes. So this is the kind of approach that they have, which I find is quite interesting, because it is reaching out to the wider world, and it's not just about, we're enemies and therefore we're going to sit in a room and not say anything to each other for hours on end. They're actually looking to do something with this. So it is quite interesting. The market's received it very well so far. It's fallen on, the prices have come down. It looks all quite good at the moment, the way things stand right now.
Constructive is the right word to say about the talks then, because even though Iran is saying basically the uranium enrichment is non-negotiable, that this is their sovereign right, can you help us understand why this one issue is so important when it comes to, sanction relief?
So the thing is, there's a lot going on here. So we were in the Middle East, which has been an area of conflict and also of extreme importance to the world because of the oil production that is out there. So we are very sensitive to that. Any sort of changes going on in there will clearly affect the market one way or the other. So you have the one side, you've got the Iranian and US discussion going on, but next week we also have seeing US meeting with Israel, which adds another dimension to the whole negotiations going on in the Middle East. As we know, this could actually put a slight delay, or perhaps even put a spanner in the works completely with any negotiations going on between the US and Iran. So it makes the situation for the market quite edgy. So even though we are seeing positivity coming through, and we really do want to hang on to that, obviously, for many, many reasons, we know full well that this could reverse around quite easily at any time.
Okay, so let's look at two different scenarios then. If negotiations stall or ultimately fail over the enrichment talks, what would the key consequences be when it comes to oil supply, trade flows, and prices?
So let's start with oil supply, which is very easy because the world is oversupplied right now. So the lights aren't going to switch off overnight. This is not going to happen. Even if negotiations completely break down and we end up with some hostilities in the region, there's enough around the place to cater for everybody around. However, when these things happen, it always again puts people on edge. What happens immediately now, what happens in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, in a year's time. So you could see some reaction based on the future expectations of the supply over quite a long period of time. So we're probably talking about medium-term scenarios. If we roll back maybe to 2022 with the invasion of Ukraine, we thought this was going to create huge problems. It really hasn't in terms of the supply. Price-wise, we've been very, very steady, relatively speaking. Yeah. Obviously, we have these high moments of market movements which create high volatility, but they tend to be temporary, and we seem to be returning towards market equilibrium quite quickly.
Okay, now let's move on to a more positive scenario. Let's say the talks continue, the US accepts some form of limited enrichment. How would the markets interpret that?
So again, we're going back to what is the situation from the fundamental point of view, and we are an oversupply market. Had this situation not arisen, had the US not sent its naval forces closer to Iran, had these negotiations not started with Iran regarding enrichment and sanctions, we would have seen the market, in all likelihood, drift off quite strongly, because we are extremely oversupplied. OPEC is maintaining its supply. It's not increasing it, which would be quite bearish, one would think. So I think that we see the fundamentals creep back in, demand versus supply, and I think right now we're oversupplied, so one would expect the market to come off.
One last thing, Marco. What should the oil markets be watching next to get a sense of where things are heading?
Okay, it's interesting how, with the way information is disseminated these days, it's in all honesty, if you're sitting there watching your social media, you're probably getting ahead of the game. But we obviously are looking for what happens with the negotiations with Iran and US. The Iranians are in there primarily to get rid of their sanctions, so they can be open to the market again. For them, that's the key move. They're not giving way on the enrichment. So what we'd be looking for is, if the US say, okay, we allow you to enrich uranium, we will let you off your sanctions. It really depends on the credibility of the West to be able to control that enrichment. So have open access to their program to be able to ensure that they're not building nuclear weapons. So we would have that. That would be very important as to the deal that comes out in the end. So the detail is going to be quite important. I think that's going to be crucial to how we determine what's going to happen next.
Great. Marco, thank you so much for your time.
No problem.
And thank you to our viewers for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.